On May 18, 1980, at 8:32 in the morning, the ground shook and a mountain that had stood for thousands of years was gone in less than a minute. 57 people died. A cubic mile of rock vanished. The explosion was heard as far away as Canada, and right now, beneath that same mountain, something is moving again. Not on the surface, not in a way you'd see on the news, but underground, something has started. Geologists are watching it in real time, and they're not giving us a clean answer about what happens next. So today we're going to go inside the data, inside the mountain, and inside the decisions that will determine the fate of over 300,000 people. Before we get to what's happening today, I need you to understand one man. His name was Harry Truman, not the president, but an 83-year-old innkeeper who lived at the base of Mount St. Helens on the shore of Spirit Lake. When scientists and government officials told him to evacuate in the spring of 1980, Harry said no. He'd lived there for 50 years. He knew that mountain better than any scientist in a lab coat, or so he believed. He called the warnings overblown. He gave interviews from his porch, smiling, defiant. The press loved him. He became a symbol, a stubborn, likable embodiment of the idea that experience beats expertise. He was wrong. When the mountain erupted, Harry Truman was buried under 200 feet of volcanic ash and debris. His body was never recovered. His lodge, his cats, his stories, his certainty, all of it gone in seconds. I'm telling you this story now, not to be dramatic, but because it is the single most important piece of context for everything you're about to hear. Because the question that scientists, engineers, and emergency managers are wrestling with right now is the same one nobody could cleanly answer in 1980. When does a sleeping volcano stop sleeping? Here's what we actually know. In recent months, scientists monitoring Mount St. Helens have detected approximately 350 small earthquakes occurring beneath the volcano. Not one big earthquake, hundreds of small ones, clustering in a specific zone deep in the rock beneath the mountain. Now, before you picture cracked walls and emergency sirens, these are micro earthquakes. The vast majority are too small to feel at the surface. You could be standing on that mountain and never know they were happening. But to a volcanologist, they are loud because they know exactly what causes them. Magma, molten rock, is moving upward into the underground reservoir beneath the mountain. As it pushes into the rock above it, the rock fractures. It cracks and shifts to accommodate the pressure. Those fractures are the earthquakes. Each one is a tiny record of the mountain rearranging itself from the inside. Geologists call this process recharge. Think of it like a battery being slowly refilled, except the battery is a chamber of superheated liquid rock sitting beneath thousands of feet of solid mountain. The magma that drained partially during the 1980 eruption is being replenished. The system that drove one of the most violent geological events in modern American history is being loaded again. And here is the part that matters. Recharge increases pressure. Every new pulse of magma entering that underground reservoir adds to the stress on the rock above it. The system is being compressed slowly from below. Now, does that mean an eruption is coming? Scientists are being careful here, and I think they're right to be. Because right now, the external signs that typically precede a major eruption are not present. The volcano's surface shape has not changed. Instruments measuring ground deformation, essentially GPS systems, precise enough to detect millimeter-level swelling in the earth, are not showing significant movement. There are no new gases breaking through the surface. Sulfur dioxide, carbon dioxide, the chemical fingerprints of magma approaching the surface are not spiking. The crater is quiet. In the language of volcanology, the volcano is showing subsurface unrest without surface expression. The activity is real, but it hasn't broken through into the observable world yet. And crucially, this has happened before. Recharge events have occurred at Mount St. Helens multiple times since 1980. The mountain has gone through periods of elevated seismic activity. Scientists have watched carefully, and then the earthquakes have faded and the system has settled. No eruption, no crisis, just the slow, unpredictable breathing of a living geological system. But one of those recharge periods, between 2004 and 2008, did lead somewhere. Not to a catastrophic explosion, but to something called lava dome growth. Magma slowly pushed up through the vent and hardened at the surface, building a new, solid dome of rock inside the crater over the course of 4 years. Lava oozed rather than exploded. It was, in the context of what this mountain is capable of, a relatively minor event. But it proved something important. It proved that that recharge can lead to eruption, that the pathway from underground activity to surface expression is real and has been traveled before at this specific volcano within living memory. Scientists describe their current work as taking the volcano's pulse. The pulse, they say, is elevated, but it is not right now an emergency. What they cannot yet tell us is whether this particular episode of recharge will fade like the others or follow the path of 2004. Here is where we need to zoom out, because the story of Mount St. Helens is not just the story of a volcano. It's the story of what sits downstream of it. If the mountain erupts at significant scale, the most immediate danger isn't lava, it's lahars. A lahar is a volcanic mud flow. What happens when volcanic material mixes with water from melted snow and ice, or from rivers and lakes disrupted by the eruption? The result is a fast-moving slurry of superheated debris, the consistency of wet concrete that flows down river valleys with extraordinary force and speed. It doesn't respect roads, bridges, or buildings. It buries everything in its path. In 1980, lahars traveled more than 50 miles from the mountain. They buried entire sections of the Toutle River Valley. They tore bridges from their foundations. They deposited so much sediment that shipping lanes on the Columbia River were blocked for months. The Cowlitz River Valley, which drains directly from Mount St. Helens, is today home to towns, rail lines, highways, and industrial infrastructure that supports commerce across the entire Pacific Northwest. A significant lahar event flowing down that valley would not just affect the people who live there, it would sever critical transport and trade routes, with ripple effects felt across the region. Scientists and emergency planners estimate that a major eruption scenario could directly threaten more than 300,000 people. And here is something that almost nobody is covering. A sediment retention dam built downstream of the volcano, specifically designed to catch volcanic debris and protect communities below, is already filling up. Over the decades since 1980, sediment has been quietly accumulating behind it. Its capacity is being consumed. Authorities are currently in the process of raising the height of that dam. They are literally building the wall taller because the space behind it is running out. And they are doing this now before any new eruption has occurred, because they know that in a significant event, the volume of new material coming down could overwhelm any barrier they can reasonably construct. That detail should sit with you for a moment. The infrastructure built to protect communities from this volcano is already under strain, just from the residual material of an eruption that happened over 40 years ago. Emergency planners are wargaming worst-case scenarios, evacuation routes, hospital surge capacity, communication infrastructure, not because they believe an eruption is certain or even probable in the near term, but because the lesson of 1980 and the lesson of Harry Truman is that volcanoes do not wait for us to feel ready. So where does that leave us? Mount St. Helens is a volcano that has erupted before and will erupt again. That is geology, not opinion, not alarmism, just fact established over thousands of years of geological record. The question has never been if. It has always been when and how big. What the current activity tells us is that the system beneath the mountain is not dormant. It is active. It is being refilled. The 350 earthquakes are not random noise. They are signal. The recharge process is measurable, real, and ongoing as you watch this video. And yet, the scientists who know this mountain better than anyone are not sounding emergency alarms. They are watching, measuring, comparing current patterns against historical ones, and waiting for the data to tell a clearer story. The monitoring technology available today, GPS deformation sensors, distributed seismograph networks, satellite-based gas detection, is vastly more sophisticated than anything that existed in 1980. We would almost certainly have more warning now than communities had then. Almost certainly is not the same as definitely. The honest scientific position is this: we are watching something we do not yet fully understand. The volcano might continue recharging without ever producing a surface eruption in our lifetimes, or the current seismic swarm could be the early chapter of something that ends very differently. The data has not yet told us which story we are in. What we know, what Harry Truman knew and refused to believe, is that the mountain decides, not us. The only thing we can control is whether we're paying attention. I want to know what you think. Do you believe the current activity at Mount St. Helens is being taken seriously enough by authorities, by media, by the people who live in its shadow? Or is this a case of scientists appropriately keeping calm while the rest of us overreact to numbers we don't fully understand? Drop your take in the comments. I read everyone. Subscribe if you're new. This is exactly the kind of story we cover. Slow-moving, underreported, and far more important than the headlines suggest. Stay curious. I'll see you in the next one.